Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You knew that because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. But you really are smart because you chose to come back to this show. And sometimes the show is a mess. Sometimes the show is great. Sometimes it is a total disaster zone. And for the people who check out the show live, you'll know that we are now 39 minutes past when it was supposed to start. Then I pushed it back. Now we're 9 minutes late. Let me tell you, can we just have a moment? Let's have a moment. I love my kids. I think they're great for the most part. I love my kids. They need to go back to school in the worst way. The mornings are chaos. It's fine. We're fine. Anyway, welcome in. Now, I will tell you that, while I enjoy setting up things ahead of time, and I have to do the thumbnails, and there was somebody who already pointed out this morning, HC over on YouTube pointed out, Russ back at it with the clickbaity thumbnails with eyes wide open and a jaw dropped and hands raised in shock. Get ready. You're all going to want to see this, LOL. Well, that's just part of playing the algorithm game on YouTube. But I have to tell you, the one thing that I don't like about it is that, I kind of have to lock myself in on what the topics are going to be. And then if something happens, I can pivot, which we're going to. We have to pivot because something happened this morning. Something broke this morning. Not Rammy's head here on the bobblehead. No, something actually did break. There's a story that came out through ESPN Plus, and we're going to break that down in a little bit about teams most likely to regress. And believe it or not, your Philadelphia Eagles are on that list. So we're going to kind of break down what ESPN, what Bill Barnwell thought is the reason that the Eagles are going to regress. We'll get there a little bit later on in the show. But I want to first go out to acknowledge all the fine people who decide to follow this show, find this show. We're going to get into the Phillies in a little bit. We'll have the Eagles today. JD Vance was in town and allegedly asked for Swiss cheese on a cheesesteak. We will break that down later. See if that's going to gain him votes or lose him votes. We'll see later on in the episode. There have been a few questions about Rob Thomson, about Bryce Harper. The Phillies are about to play the Braves, so that's a really big series. So that is on tap for today. We will not be getting into, at least today, the Philadelphia Union with a chance to go to the League's Cup final. No, we will maybe get there later in the week because if they win, they can make the final. We're not doing that one today. But I will tell you that there's a lot of stuff to get into today, and I'm very excited to do this with all of you. So let's go over to the comments, as we do every episode, before we get into today's topics. Andrew Fawcett says, good morning. Waiting to get blood work done. I need some damn coffee. Good on you, Andrew. I've had no coffee. This is part of the chaotic morning with the kids. I've had none. I'm very upset about it. I'm a little bit cranky. I'm a lot of it cranky. It was also trash day. Guess who was running around the house trying to get the trash off the kid? It was great. It was a good morning. It's a good morning. Andrew also says, Russ picks the most self-deprecating images of himself for the thumbnails. Yes. Did the mug warmer break? No, the mug warmer is just fine. It's over there. But there's just no coffee in this house this morning. No La Colombe brewing this morning. Joe Papel? Nope. Anyway, Nico says, what up? HC is here. Don't cry over spilled coffee on your keyboard. I had to get rid of that keyboard. That was a Snow the Goalie thing a few months ago when I went to raise the desk and the mug warmer. No, I went to pull the second screen forward and I knocked over my coffee and my coffee went all over the keyboard before I went to do an episode of Snow the Goalie with Ant and Bundy. And they laughed at me. And I'm like, guys, it's not funny. This is my livelihood. I can't not have a keyboard. And it was bad. I worked through it for a while. Jose Nunez asking a very personal question this morning. But fine, Jose, I'll take it. Do your kids like the mustache? They acknowledge the power of the Rustache. I tend to be a little bit more fun when I have a mustache. So maybe it's a good sign. Perhaps it's an authoritative mustache. I don't know. HC responding about the thumbnails. Do it for the algorithm. T from the TO3. What up, Russ? T from the TO3 also says, what ass clown at ESPN hates the Eagles? Don't worry. We're going to get into it because I think it's actually a very interesting, legitimately, it's an interesting piece. There's some good insight into why the Eagles could regress, which is why I've decided that we're going to kind of pivot a little bit this morning because I don't think that it's something that we have to go out of our way to say is the lead story this morning. But it's something. It's certainly not nothing. Sean C says, could have had an open convention, could have had it all. I know. We could have been in the midst of an open convention. I watched a little bit of the DNC last night. Maybe we'll talk about that at the end of the show. That's where the politics kind of tend to live on this show, is at the end. So the people who, get triggered anytime somebody mentions a party they don't align with, they can go scream into an echo chamber at the end of the show. Joe Papel asks, we're not going to talk about the Patrik Laine trade to Montreal. No, I did see. Joe, remind me in a little bit. Or I could, fuck it. We'll do it. We'll do it right now. So I saw this Patrik Laine deal go down, sending him to Montreal for a defenseman. And Laine, I think, also went with a second-round pick. And there was like a initial, not even blowback. There were some people, not rational people, who were like, why couldn't the Flyers have traded for Patrik Laine? Would have been a great deal for the Flyers. Would have been fantastic. Flyers could use a sniper. And I was like, I don't think that's true. No, I don't. I saw Sam Carchidi put out on Twitter. They're like, oh, the Flyers need snipers. Why wouldn't you try to make a trade for Patrik Laine? I can tell you exactly why you don't make a trade for Patrik Laine. Team's supposed to be bad, right? Like, we all want the Flyers to be bad, right? Like, we want elite talent, right? Patrik Laine is not elite talent. We understand this, right? We do. At least some of us do. That's why you don't trade for Patrik Laine. But no, I don't actually know what to think about Montreal's team. I'm still not sure. Which actually does remind me, the last topic that we have at some point today is Alexei Kolosov, who apparently wants to go back to the KHL. So that's another thing. We're having a somewhat disjointed start to our Tuesday show, and that's okay. Nico says Rustache. Ethan says Rustradamus. I don't know what this is in reference to, Andrew. Are you more upset about the coffee or the coffee or the keyboard? I was more upset about the keyboard and the coffee. I guess both. I can't drink the coffee out of the keyboard when it was there. Linda Joseph says, good morning. Will the Rustache make it to the hockey season? Yes, it will. I'm actually growing my hair out. I don't know how much you could tell the difference on the stream right now. The hair is growing out. I usually keep it super tight on the sides and everything. I've decided I'm going to grow out the top. I used to have long hair. I don't know how long I'm actually going to let it go, but the stash stays. The Rustache is going to be here for quite some time, unless I accidentally shave it off like it did that one time. That was a bad day. The sadness on my wife's face was legit. I didn't think she was going to leave me, but I definitely thought that she was going to stay away from me for a little bit when I accidentally shaved off the Rustache. It's very sad. Ethan says he's really turned off by the wig party. Good to know. NT from the TO3 notes that Patrik Laine and Torts hate each other. Side note, shocker. Players not liking Torts. Yeah, certainly not the case here anymore. 100%. Yep. All right, let's get into some stuff. I want to start with the Phillies. We'll go to the Eagles. We'll talk about Kolosov. We can talk about JD Vance winning Swiss on his cheesesteak at the end of the show. Let's get into a couple of the things that do matter, though, from the onset. Now, if you watched or listened to Crossing Broadcast on Monday, you'll remember that I got a little bit heated, just a wee bit, a teeny tiny bit heated, about the decision not to pinch hit Bryce Harper or JT Realmuto with a chance to potentially win the game, or at least put yourself in position to win the game against the Nationals, go for the 4-game sweep, enter the series on the road with the Braves, riding a legitimate high. And Rob Thomson sat back and said, no, we're not doing that. I'm giving Harper and Realmuto an actual full day off. Never mind the fact that they ended up being off on Monday as well. Okay, so the whole team had off Monday. Rob Thomson decided that he was going to be a true Canadian and stick to his word, and that he was going to give those two guys, those two highly paid players, a full day off, followed by another day off. And I got emotional yesterday in that, there were people in the comments at the time who were like, why are you getting so upset, Russ? It's a 162-game season. It's just one game. Bryce Harper deserves a day off. JT Realmuto deserves a day off. I'm like, well, okay. I just want to play this one out because I know that the people who check in on the show are just smarter people. Okay, better people. Very highly motivated people who tune into a show in the morning as they get ready to go to work, or while they're sitting at their desk, or while they're getting ready to go off to school, or while they're, driving the trash truck. I have no idea. But they're great people. So maybe these people will have a different opinion. But when I looked at it, I said, okay, every game matters. We know that every game matters. It's critical, right? And in a normal year where you're battling atop the NL East and there are multiple teams that you're actively chasing or that you're actively kind of throwing elbows with, or a season where you have a team like the Braves that look like the Braves, that are the favorite to win the division. In that kind of season, it's almost inconceivable that Rob Thomson would have said, well, no, we're not going to pinch hit Bryce Harper. We're not going to pinch hit JT Realmuto, because in that scenario, you come back and you say, no, like, this is a chance to actually finish off a division rival in the Nationals, go for the 4-game sweep. The momentum matters, all that. And you're chasing the Braves. And so every game matters, especially from late August on, every game matters. But this Phillies team that has, from time to time, kind of rested on their laurels and has gotten complacent, they kind of sat back and said, no, we're not going to run the risk, whatever the risk is supposed to be. We're not going to run the risk of having one of those guys go up and take an at-bat when I told them they're going to have the day off. And I thought about it last night. I did. And I thought, you know what? Maybe some of the commenters were right. Maybe I was wrong. Perhaps Bryce Harper and JT Realmuto deserved the day off. So I slept on it, and here's what I woke up saying. Every game matters! Every single game matters! What are we doing? I took a day, and then I got angrier. I was like, wait a second. I go back, right? Go back to the offseason. What did Bryce Harper want? Bryce Harper wanted an extension, right? He's already on a ridiculously long contract that's going to take him into years where he's not going to be a highly productive baseball player, but he wanted more years. That's what we heard in the offseason. Okay, fine. That works. That's great. We talked, I think, at the very beginning of this show, maybe it was Crossing Broadcast a month before, but when the quotes came out, I was like, no, I don't want to give him an extension. Like, certainly not. It's not my money. I get that. But, like, we're already in some pretty bad years, some pretty bad age years. The only way that you give him an extension is really to be a brand ambassador. When he retires, like, you want him to go into the Hall of Fame as a Philly, like, all that kind of stuff. If that matters to you, fine, you give him extra years. And then I saw a little bit of conjecture on Twitter yesterday after I got done doing Crossing Broadcast, because there were some people out there who were like, well, Bryce Harper's he's got to get in the way. He's got to get in Thompson's face. And I said this yesterday as well. Take a bat, tell them, listen, we are good to go. We absolutely need to have me go up to bat. I need a chance to win the game. I need a chance to deliver here at the end of a game, to at least extend it. Put me in, coach. And I saw a lot of people with blowback to that idea. And I think it was somebody at WIP, it might have been Tom Kelly, had the same idea. Like, you got to grab a bat, you got to go up to your manager, and Topper's not going to get in the way. I said this yesterday, like, in fairness, there is no reason to believe that if Bryce Harper really wanted to step up in that moment, he would not have been able to. There's no reason to believe that if he had gone to Thompson and said, I'm good, I'm going to go in, I'm going to take this at bat, that Thompson would have stood in his way. Like, no offense. Rob Thomson was here because the Phillies made a change at the managerial position. Rob was kind of viewed as sloppy seconds. He proved himself. The vibes were great. The results were there. But Rob Thomson was never really viewed as a guy that was going to have a massive market for his coaching ability. Meanwhile, you have Bryce Harper, who's been an MVP, who is the face of your franchise, who's arguably one of the real faces of Major League Baseball. If he wants to go up and take an at-bat at the end of a game and try to set the example for his team, he's going to do it. Rob Thomson does not have the ability to stand in the way of that. Okay, so that's just where I landed. And I thought about it overnight. And I'm not going to do this. This is where, like, the clickbaity stuff happens, right? Because the clickbaity stuff would say, well, I think this actually shows that Bryce Harper's a bitch. It shows that Bryce Harper doesn't want to win. No, that's not what it is. But to me, it is a little bit, not concerning, it's just a little bit disappointing. Because I would fully expect that a leader on the team, when you have the chance to finish off a 4-game sweep and potentially put yourself in even better position going into the Braves series with momentum, would want that moment, would want to take that at bat, would want to step up in a big moment. Now, we can have that conversation about Bryce Harper. You can have the conversation about JT Realmuto. Whichever way you want to go is fine. I'll just point out that, like, you were very clearly still in that game. And as the season starts to dwindle and as the games start to wind down, in theory, if you have a good series against the Braves, guess what? None of it matters because you'll be up by a significant margin. But the problem is when you start to kind of cut corners, you could run yourself into a situation where at the end of the regular season, you no longer have the best record in the National League and you lose home field advantage, which is why I get upset because it's like, look, do whatever you can to put yourself in the most advantageous position, right? Get home field advantage because it does matter. I know that the Dodgers typically don't perform particularly well in the postseason. I know that it's a running joke. I totally get it. And at the same time, having home field advantage could be the difference between whether or not you ultimately make it to the World Series or don't. So when you have an opportunity to pinch hit an MVP and you don't take it because for some reason this like day off followed by another day off means something to you as a manager, I have a problem with that. I do. I genuinely think that it's like, I think it's kind of stupid. I do. Now, the bigger thing is that John Middleton had a quote. And John Middleton's quote about that situation, just about like the Phillies play in general falling off in a significant way, is something that I found truly intriguing. It was something that like, I don't exactly know how, if you're Rob Thomson, you feel fine. But I'm going to go to, there are some quotes from John Middleton. And I believe this was to justmlb.com, or maybe this was from over the weekend. Middleton noted that it's time to shake off the cobwebs and start playing like it's May or June. The Rangers and Diamondbacks had time to recover and got hot. Hopefully we will too. You can't just assume it's going to happen. You have to make it happen. And one of the other things that Middleton went on to say, and one of the things that I think got kind of in people's heads a little bit, is that he said it was a totally unacceptable stretch of baseball, that going 8-18 was totally and completely unacceptable, and that it comes down to coaches and it comes down to players. It comes down to everybody. You have to figure out how you went from playing at a 700 clip in the first 3.5 months of the season to like a 328 clip here since the All-Star break. Like it's a legitimate concern. When the owner of the team starts vocally expressing publicly his concern, chances are he had previously gone to the players or to the coaches, right? Because you don't want to put your team on blast publicly unless you feel like the message might not have gotten through. Then all of a sudden, it's a matter of, is that what happened? Or is this like a PR stunt where you're trying to speak directly to the fan base and say, I get it. I think this sucks too. I think this is disappointing as well. And I'm not going to allow for this team to be overly complacent. Maybe that's what it was. Truly, it's entirely possible that that's what this was from John Middleton. Maybe the reason that he decided to go public with his disappointment is purely to speak to the fan base. And I assume that he would have spoken to Rob Thomson and to a Bryce Harper, maybe to the clubhouse. He also noted in one article with the Inquirer that Scott Lauber did that he tries to stay out of the way, that he actively tries to avoid being in the locker room and away from telling people how to do their jobs. He puts trust that the coaches coach, the players play, and he stays out of it. Now, everything comes down to the series that we're about to get into, right? Phillies-Braves. Everything comes down to this. Because this series, this Phillies-Braves series can effectively determine the NL East. It could, in theory, put the Braves out to pasture. It could, in theory, build a big enough lead that even a Phillies cold streak at the plate might not matter. So the Phillies enter this series up 7 games in the NL East. They're going into Atlanta for a 3-game stretch. And the good news, if you're all about good news, if you're looking for the positive vibes, if you're looking to figure out like, how the hell am I supposed to look at this series and feel like the Phillies are going to come out on top? Let's look at the pitching matchups, because ultimately that is part of what's going to matter. The Phillies are able to at least somewhat stack at least part of their rotation for the series. So on Tuesday night, Zach Wheeler's on the mound facing Ronaldo Lopez. On the surface, that's a pitcher's duel. Wheeler's got a 2.72 ERA. Lopez has a 2.06 ERA. Both have over 100 strikeouts. Obviously, Wheeler has gotten more results this year, 12-5, 162 Ks. Lopez is not bad, 7-4, 102 of his own. That's tonight. Is it possible that this could end up becoming a game that isn't decided until the 8th or 9th inning? Potentially. Is this another one of those moments where I say if you lose, that pinch hitting decision against the Nationals looms large? Perhaps. Then you look at Wednesday night's matchup. Aaron Nola is on the mound for the Phillies. 11-6, 3.45 ERA, 142 strikeouts on the season. Opposed by Max Fried, who, by the way, is on my fantasy team. Sometimes I forget to put him in the lineup. I'm not having a good fantasy baseball season. 7-7, 3.62 ERA, 115 strikeouts of his own. So you've got your two best pitchers. If all goes the way that you expect it to, you have your ace in Wheeler. You have the guy that for a long time you had believed was your ace in Aaron Nola as the number 2 guy in the series. And then the question is what happens in the third game. So in theory, the belief is that the Phillies are going to be able to have Christopher Sanchez in to start the third game. Now, does the determination of who ends up pitching in that game, does that get affected at all by how the first 2 games play out? I have no idea. But it seems like Sanchez could be the guy. Sanchez has had a little bit of an up and down stretch. Sanchez is a guy who, I've come on this show many times now saying you can't expect your 4th pitcher to pitch like a number 2 the entire season. That doesn't happen. It almost never happens. Even on the best teams in baseball, you can't expect that kind of production. It's largely unfair, and eventually there's going to be a regression to the mean. If Sanchez pitches even remotely well, if the first 2 games of the series go well enough, then everything should be fine. And again, you enter this with a 7-game lead. So if you end up, let's say you sweep, okay? Let's say that you go into Atlanta, you somehow muster up the intestinal and testicular fortitude, and you pick up a sweep. 10-game lead at that point. You will have played, 127 games at that point? 127? Does that sound right? That sounds right. 127 games. At that point, is the division totally out of reach for Atlanta? No. Is it a crippling, debilitating blow for the Braves? At that point, it could be. Very well could be. You win 2 out of 3, you've extended the lead in the division. You win 1 out of 3, I'm not loving it. If you go down to Atlanta and get swept, now all of a sudden it's a 4-game lead. So, it's fun when you play with the math, right? Because a sweep for the Phillies, it's a 10-game lead. A sweep for the Braves, it's a 4-game lead. That's a difference of 6 games, right? It's a 6-game swing potentially if a sweep happens either way. That's massive. And especially at this time in the season, that's massive. Because if things do go sideways in Atlanta, all of a sudden the division's back in play. And that should be a concern to the Phillies. That's why you can't get complacent. Complacency is going to kill you if you are the Phillies. You cannot allow yourselves to go down to Atlanta, kick your feet up, say, we only really need to win 1 of these games. We only need to put in X percentage of effort. We're going to be fine. No, you have to treat this like it's a playoff series. It's not hyperbolic to say that, and it's not hyperbolic or ridiculous to expect that of your team. Meanwhile, this is on the other side of things. The Mets are in the midst of a series with the Orioles. Sir Anthony Dominguez blew a save. The Mets won on a walk-off homer on Monday night. They have 2 games left at home against the Orioles. Look, Baltimore, good enough team. Baltimore certainly has their own flaws. Apparently, they're starting to learn that taking former Phillies relievers who didn't exactly perform to the best of their ability is not necessarily the best strategy when you're trying to build a postseason roster and you're trying to build a back end of the bullpen that is going to be able to perform in the postseason. But let's play this one out. If New York is able to do what they did on Monday night against the Orioles, if they're able to do that and then they go face the Padres, all while the Phillies and Braves are meeting, it is possible that if the Phillies struggle, now all of a sudden you have the Braves and the Mets feeling like they're back in it before the month of August is over. And then it's a real rat race in September. There are few series in a season that have the kind of legitimate ramifications that this one can. This series is, by all accounts, a must win. You have to at least go into Atlanta and win 2 of 3. And if you can pull off the sweep, it's great. But if the series gets away from this Phillies team, it's bad, bad, very bad. And there's no other way to look at it. I'll go over to the comments. I want to see if there's anybody who feels, anybody feels, totally crazy about this series. Let's see. Sean C. notes that Austin Riley's out for the rest of the season. That's a huge blow for the Braves. Got to get 2 out of 3 this week. Could put them out of their misery. I 100% agree. Sean C. also said, if Sunday showed anything, it's that there are huge concerns in the bullpen. Is there anybody out there that you can count on with confidence in October anymore? I don't know. No, maybe not. I do think that Estevez is going to be fine, but like that might be it. It's a shame too, because Jose Alvarado, who I have, spent time on this show saying, hey, I think he can actually be a pretty good dude. He's fallen apart. So maybe not so much. Let's see. Joe Papel notes, the game tonight could get uncomfortably close, and then you leave Wheeler in one inning too long. That's possible. I think they're going to be careful with Wheeler, though. This is not reporting anything. I think that there have been a few concerns about like whether or not Wheeler's health is like 100% there. I don't think you're going to see them try to stretch him from the 7th into the 8th or something tonight. Like, no matter how the game is going, I don't think you're going to see them push Wheeler too far. They cannot afford to have Wheeler get hurt or to be out or to miss any kind of meaningful time. That would be really bad. Andrew Fawcett with an apt comparison. Let's hope the Phillies don't become the 07 Mets. That was a hell of a collapse. We mocked the Mets for it. LOL Mets. It was great. It was a fantastic moment as a Phillies fan. But boy, yeah, Andrew's right. You better hope that it doesn't happen to you. Sean C. says 2 out of 3 this week and 2 out of 4 next week should be enough. Joe Papel thinks that it really does come down to Tuesday's game. If Wheeler loses game 1, you're in trouble. If Wheeler loses game 1, if the Phillies collectively lose game 1 and everything lands on Aaron Nola's head, this is not going to be a series win. Like, I think we can all kind of bank on that. I need somebody to pull the numbers because I could be totally crazy. But when is the last time you can remember the Phillies going into a series, Wheeler gets blown up, Nola goes out and has a Cy Young performance the next night? How many times has that happened? Not just this season. Let's go back 3 seasons. Does it happen a lot? Because I can't remember a lot of times where I've been like, oh, Wheeler got shelled. At least we have Aaron Nola on the mound. He's going to be the guy to bring it back. He's going to be the guy to lead us to the promised land. Not so sure. And Andrew Foster checks and says, Nola is still an enigma. Yes, he is. 100%. J Toxic 49 checks in over on YouTube, says it's a tone-setting series for sure. That's the thing, too. Like, I feel like I've now maybe brought down the mood of the show this morning because I'm looking at this and it's just like there's a lot there is a lot that goes into this series. There's a ton of potential ways that this could play out. It's like the butterfly effect, right? Like, if you sweep, you're very much on a collision course with maybe being the top team in the National League. You have your division essentially won. Just don't vomit on yourselves for the last month of the season and you're fine. You get swept and all of a sudden shit hits the fan. Like, then you really do start to have those questions and concerns about like Rob Thomson's decision-making. There's going to be a massive magnifying glass on it. Then you're going to go back to Sunday's decision not to pinch hit, among others this season, where it's going to be like, oh, is he the right guy? 610-632. Like, you're going to have that. You're going to have a lot of people getting themselves worked up about like, if the bats go cold again, why does it keep happening? Who needs to get fired? Who needs to get benched? You can put a lot of those concerns to bed by going out and having a strong series against the Braves. And by the way, after they're done with the Braves, then they're on the road against the Royals. Then they welcome the Astros to town. And then they welcome the Braves to town again. So, like, there's a lot going on here. This is what I'm saying. Like, it's not totally done if you go and have a good series in Atlanta. The season's not over. The NL East race isn't totally over. You have a Braves series in Philly in a 4-game set next week. That's a huge one. That might even be a bigger one. But if you set the tone, if you take advantage of the fact that Austin Riley's out and they're probably feeling a little bit bad for themselves, they're licking their wounds, this is the time to put your foot on their throat. And then, like, yes, the 4-game set at home will matter, but in theory, maybe it doesn't matter quite as much. I digress. Let's see. Sean C says, I'd pay to have you and Ant talk Phillies for 45 minutes or so. If we thought Snow the goalie had animosity at times, that podcast would end with fisticuffs. I refuse to talk about the Phillies with Ant. Ant is a Phillies fanboy. He hates getting told that he's a Phillies fanboy, but he absolutely is. Ant loves the Phillies. Ant loves the Phillies in a way that I don't have a comparison to. I don't even think I love any of these teams as much as Ant loves the Phillies. He loves baseball. He's a sick, sick man. He loves watching West Coast games. He would actively choose to watch Mike Trout play games, before this year when he was hurt all this time. But like, he would actively go out of his way to like watch a shitty Mariners team a few years ago just because he loves baseball so much. But like, I think his vision's clouded. I think it's distorted. I think that he truly does believe, and if you listen to Crossed Up, he believes that the Phillies are going to make it to the World Series, win the World Series. It's entirely possible that they can and that they will, but I'm not putting money on it. I certainly wouldn't. I have legitimate concerns about the team. I've had concerns about the team since the offseason. I had them around the trade deadline. Like, that doesn't change. Again, they are one injury in the rotation away from things going to shit real fast. Like that is a very real concern. The bullpen concerns, I will give them credit because of getting Estevez, but like, they still probably have a few concerns late in games. And I still think that they needed one more impact bat to really put themselves in position to be the strongest team going into a World Series run. He and I don't agree. I mean, I'll let you in on a little secret. I'm on a text thread with Ant and Bundy. And Bundy likes to needle Ant about the Phillies. So this is a thing that we do. And then I kind of sit back and then I'll kind of try to be like the middleman, like I am on Snow the Goalie sometimes. But like, Bundy will needle Ant. Ant will get very upset and he'll like start to throw stats out and all these like great anecdotes about why the Phillies are going to, win the World Series, all that. And I just watch the cannon fodder go overhead. And then I sit back and I laugh and I say, Ant, like, you realize that you're a Phillies fanboy. And then it pisses him off and then we don't talk for a little bit and it's fine. Now, we'll point this out. Andrew Fawcett says Reverend Russ might end up being replaced if we did the Phillies podcast. Rev Russ get replaced because Rev Russ told Anthony a certain thing that he needed to do in order for Rev Russ to do the actual officiating of the wedding. Did Ant listen? No, he didn't. We might have an update on that at some point on Snow the Goalie. Ant's wife probably going to hate me at some point. And I have to point out that it was her fiance who didn't listen. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Okay. Now, Joe Papel says if we do that Phillies podcast, that has to be Ant and Russ, Snow the catcher. I don't know if I like that one quite as much. Maybe not quite as much. John Kruk joins the show as Bundy. I like it. That sounds great. Let's go see. Let's see. HC says Ant sounds like a normal sports fan instead of a normal Philly sports fan. Russ, you got to nudge that inner WIP caller out of Ant. I don't know if it exists. It does. The thing is, this is actually the shame of things, is that like there's a scenario, there's like a world where Ant and I did more of like an all Philly sports show. But what would happen is he does like the uncle at Thanksgiving thing. Oh, it's okay, son. Sit down. Let's have a conversation. I am the oracle of knowledge. And I was like, well, no. Sometimes, maybe not. Sometimes you know things. Sometimes you don't. I don't know. All right, I want to get off this. Let's go talk about, for a second here, let's talk about Alexei Kolosov. It's going to be very short, and then we're going to get into this Eagles story from this morning that I kind of agree with, and I have a little bit of concern about. We'll get there in a second. So Alexei Kolosov, really quick. For those who are unaware, the reports have come out again that Alexei Kolosov doesn't want to play for the Flyers, doesn't want to play in the North American system. He knows that he's not going to play for the Flyers. Ivan Fedotov was given a massive, I say massive in quotes, but like based on his amount of games played, a multi-million-dollar contract. Sam Erson's going to be the number one guy in net unless Fedotov absolutely plays him out of that starting job in camp and in the preseason. So Kolosov looks at it and says, there's no way that I'm going to play for the Flyers. Why do I want to uproot my life and play for Lehigh Valley? Right? The funny thing is, the more things or the more time that passes, the more reports that come out, the more I continue to be proven right. Funny how these things work out. Kolosov, like, just conceptually, Kolosov doesn't want to play for the Phantoms. Why would he? I know I've come back to this a few times, but like, just to recap for the new people, okay? There was a time last season after Carter Hart had to go turn himself in to the London, Ontario police, and the Flyers desperately needed a backup because Cal Peterson wasn't that guy. And Felix Sandstrom couldn't be that guy. They wanted to have somebody come over and be the backup. And for a little bit, it looked like it was going to be Alexei Kolosov, who his time with Dynamo Minsk had run out. And it was like, all right, he's going to come over. He might compete for that backup spot with the Flyers. At worst, he's going to be the lead guy for the Phantoms going into the playoffs and get used to the North American game. Everything's going to be hunky-dory. And as he's waiting on his visa, Fedotov lands in the U.S., gets his visa, suits up for the Flyers. Kolosov is Kolosov got usurped, I guess, or had gotten jumped on the depth chart. Then Kolosov doesn't play much for the Phantoms. He doesn't get to really get in net in the playoffs. Cal Peterson does, which I think was an absolute waste and a disaster. I still don't understand the decision that Ian LePerriere and company made. But like Kolosov effectively was like, sent to the U.S., was almost, maybe he felt like he was being punished just by circumstance. Didn't get the opportunity that maybe he either been sold or his agent had sold to him or he had believed was in play. So his contract, his time with Dynamo Minsk is up. That part is over. He is Flyers player property in a sense, right? Like his rights are owned by the Flyers. The report came out at the end of the season that like he was unhappy. He didn't like the situation in Philly. He didn't like the situation in Lehigh Valley. There weren't a lot of Russian-speaking players. Then there was like this clickbaity thing that came out that was more like, he was abandoned in a hotel, in like a 4-star hotel that I believe is connected to or right at the rink in Lehigh Valley, which then led to like this whole other big shit show of, you had reporter going after reporter. You had the organization kind of trying to funnel information to different people. But like ultimately, Kolosov wasn't like sent to the gulag. He wasn't sent into like Kensington to go live among people hunched over with fentanyl. Like it wasn't that bad, right? But what the Flyers did fail him on is that they didn't have a lot of Russian speakers with him. And when you're 22 years old and in a new country and you don't speak the language, that's still a lot to get used to. That's still a big adjustment. And then when you're not playing, especially when like I meant enough to you and I meant enough to your organization for you to bring me over at the end of the season instead of just waiting for training camp. If I meant enough for you guys to bring me over, then at least show me the decency, the respect, the whatever, to like let me play a little bit. That has to be the thought process that Alexei Kolosov went through. So anyway, things go on. And over the course of the summer, there's been a lot of, Kolosov wants to go back to Belarus. He wants to go back to the KHL. He doesn't want to play here. So then the report comes out yesterday or 2 days ago. Kevin Kurz, who does really nice work for The Athletic, he comes out and says that, regardless of whether or not Kolosov wants to go back to the KHL or not, the Flyers own his rights. They are under absolutely no legal responsibility to send him back to the KHL. He has a binding contract with the Flyers. I will point people back to an old episode of this show where Kolosov is featured on the thumbnail. But I said virtually the exact same thing. I think there's even a clip of it somewhere on the Russ Joy Show YouTube channel where I said they have absolutely no obligation to doing what he wants. He signed a contract with the Flyers. They sent him out on loan as a show of good faith, and also they had nowhere to play him stateside. Now they do. In theory, if you're the Flyers, your goal should be to have Alexei Kolosov over here and playing as the starter for Lehigh Valley this year. That should be the goal. And the idea and what the Flyers should be funneling back to Kolosov and to his camp, to his agent, to whomever is, we need to see what Fedotov is. We need to see what Ersson is for another season. But like really Fedotov, we have to see what he is and then make a decision from there. Come over and be ready. Chances are at some point, Ersson and or Fedotov could get hurt. Kolosov gets a shot in the NHL. There's a way to do this. But for some reason, it seems like there is a disconnect between the player and the organization. And from a few of the things that have been kind of going around, it sounds like the organization's kind of like, we don't know why the kid's doing this. We have no idea why he's as upset as he is. We don't know why he wants to go back to the KHL. That's really not in play. And then from Kolosov's camp, it's essentially like, why would he want to come over here and have to learn this like new game to get himself like, why should he do that when there's still a chance that he could be the backup for the AHL team? And like, there's a bit of a pride factor. Those camps don't seem to be meshing right now. The thought process doesn't seem to be meshing. And then what that causes is the online discourse that's been going around of people saying, well, shit, if you're looking at this from an objective standpoint, if you're looking at it from this neutral standpoint, if you're looking at the Danny Briere, right? If you're looking at it, you're saying, all right, well, they lost Cutter Gauthier for Jamie Drysdale, who's been hurt and who might never be the same level of player that Cutter Gauthier could be, which I think is fair. There's a possibility that you could lose out now on one of your better goaltending prospects in Kolosov, or at least you've maybe not burned the bridge, but it's starting to light. There are questions. There are concerns. There are maybe even fears about player relations here. The flip side of that is the Flyers managed to figure out a way. Matvei Mishkov managed to figure out a way to get himself out of Russia 2 years early. Flyers had nothing to do with it. They can't negotiate with the KHL team. Yeah, we've been through this. Mishkov came over. Fedotov came over. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. You're going to get some players over, you're not going to get some others over. The big thing, I think, if you're a Flyers fan, is you should feel good about the fact that this team, that this Flyers team has been able to get over an impact player in Mishkov. And if that ultimately means that the hockey gods are going to ding you Kolosov, that stinks. If the idea is, hey, you were able to pull off this nice, like, human rights story, I guess, of getting Fedotov over here, but that's going to potentially cost you Kolosov. I don't know where you land. We're going to go to the comments. I don't see a scenario here where like Kolosov gets what he wants. I don't see a scenario where the Flyers say, yes, we're going to loan you out to Dynamo Minsk again. That's not going to happen. They're going to burn another year of his ELC sending him on loan. They have no reason to do it. They need to figure out a way to make it known to this kid and to his camp that like, no, you need to be here. And there are Russian speakers that are going to be in camp. You need to be here. Be here with Mishkov. Be here with Fedotov. Experience what camp is like. Get acclimated. Meet the team. Work with the English tutors like Mishkov has been doing. Do all that stuff. And you could very well be in line for a multi-million-dollar contract in the not-too-distant future. I don't know why this is such a hard sell. I don't know why there's a disconnect. Let's go over to the comments. We got a lot. Oh my gosh, there's a lot over here. Okay. Let's go to Andrew Fawcett, who says, watching Snow the Goalie has moments where I feel like my drunk uncles are arguing at a barbecue. Yes. I think we might do an episode this week. I think there's a chance. I have conversations that I have to have with the Flyers. We're going to do our show. I want to get some clarity on a few things. I think we're also working on an interview or something for the next week or two. We'll see. Show will be back. It'll be good. Sean C. said, Kevin Kerr's tweet completely turned me off on Kolosov. Could have been much easier. Kolosov communicated that with the team months ago. I guess about going back, wanting to be loaned. That was communicated, and the Flyers have no desire to do it. Andrew Fawcett is correct here. One injury and Kolosov gets called up for his debut. Very short-sighted on his part. This is where I think that there's this weird disconnect between the player and the team. I think that has probably been communicated, but I think it's a 22-year-old kid and goalies are weird. Goalies are just traditionally weird. And it's hard for them to understand or to wrap their minds around the fact that you're going to uproot your life, end up here. You don't speak the language. We are putting you in not the most advantageous position. But if somebody gets hurt, you might get a shot at the NHL level. Sean C. says, personally, I'm in the camp of you took the signing bonus, you will be here. Spending 2 years of your ELC on loan is total BS. Shesterkin had no qualms with playing a season in the AHL. That's a good case study. That's a good one to kind of throw. And it's entirely fair. There's no way to argue it. Again, this is where I think the disconnect between the player and the team is kind of a mess. Sean also notes that if a trade is the only way this is solved, so be it. I don't want to trade Kolosov. I'd actually like to see what Kolosov is going to be. But I think it's imperative that the Flyers make it known you're going to be the starter in Lehigh Valley. You're one injury away from getting a call up to the NHL. This is not over. Just because Fedotov is here, just because we gave him this contract, doesn't mean your NHL dream is dead. HC says, Briere has done everything he can to at this point. He offered to bring his girlfriend over, said they will do everything to help him transition to North America, but he's under contract and he needs to be here. That's the thing. Like I said weeks ago on this show, go back, check it out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I said that when it comes to Kolosov and to him getting comfortable and all that, and he needs to be here, I find it hard to believe that given the way that the KHL has been working with getting players out of their contracts early and over to the NHL, which again, NHL teams, they can't negotiate with the KHL teams. Definitely not. I don't think the KHL would want to burn the bridge with how things have been going, getting their players over to the NHL. I don't think they'd want to burn it by telling a KHL team, yeah, you guys can go ahead and sign this guy, even though he's under contract to an NHL team. I just don't see it. Like, I don't see Dynamo Minsk being able to offer a contract to Kolosov, him signing it, and that being held, like that being upheld. I just don't see it. I think Kolosov's going to have to be here. I don't think he has much of a choice. HC says it's time for him to man up and live up to the agreement that he signed. Andrew Fawcett says it's dumb that he didn't play, but it is what it is. Andrew Fawcett, HC pointed out to Andrew Fawcett, apparently Briere said on Nasty Knuckles he'll get Russian-speaking players to help him. Good. Just surround him with a bunch of Russians. Who cares? Speak it. Like, they don't even have to all be players, right? Surround the guy with other Russian speakers. Get him comfortable. Get him over here. Like, here's where the good scenario plays out, right? I don't know what Fedotov is. I genuinely have no idea. Fedotov might be a good player. He might be a bad player. We have no idea. A very limited sample size with the guy landing here in the U.S., getting his visa unbelievably quickly, having pads that had nothing on them. I mean, they were basic pads that hadn't been broken in, putting him in some really high leverage games, some high pressure situations that Tortorella himself had even said was like a little bit unfair. I don't think you can get any real semblance of an idea of what Ivan Fedotov is based on the end of last season. You're, in theory, about to get an idea of what a full season of Fedotov as the backup, or maybe even as the starter in certain spells, is going to look like. And if he ends up being what people in the organization thought he was going to be being sent off to do military service, then it's a hell of a coup. Getting him on a multi-million-dollar deal on a multi-year agreement is fantastic. I will tell you this. We'll have this moment, okay? Before everything went to shit, timeline-wise, and we don't say anyone is guilty or innocent here at the Russ Joy Show. Before the Carter Hart stuff came to be widely publicly known, before he had to turn himself into London, Ontario police, the organization had clearly done some planning around the possibility that he wasn't going to be here, okay? But if you go back to pre-Fedotov being sent to go do his Russian military service, there had been a thought when he signed his ELC with the team that there were some people in the organization who believed Fedotov might have been better than Carter Hart, that thought that if Fedotov and Carter Hart went into camp together, Fedotov might have ended up being the better player. They might not have replaced Hart as the starter, but you would have seen much closer to like a 55-45 split than, what you ended up getting, or in theory, you were going to get from like a Hart and Ersson, right? And then things changed. Fedotov was gone. He missed out on a year of playing to go do the military service. There was all that. If Fedotov, at his age, at his skill, if he can be that 1 or 1A guy, then you have a hell of a coup. Then maybe you aren't as concerned about Kolosov. Because if he can be a 1 or 1A, and Sam Ersson can kind of go back to the form that he was prior to Hart's legal issues, you have two guys that might actually be starting caliber goalies in a tandem for a team that is going to be bad. That's not a terrible outcome. This is where the Kolosov thing does come into play, though, because then all of a sudden Kolosov might be an intriguing trade piece. Or maybe the Flyers sit back and say, we like what we're seeing as Kolosov as the starter at Lehigh Valley at 22 years of age. Maybe that allows you to trade a Fedotov or to trade an Ersson and have Kolosov come up and be the backup at the NHL level. Maybe not next season, but the season after. This is why, again, the Flyers have no obligation to trade him. They have no obligation to loan him out anywhere. They want to see what he's going to look like in the North American game. That to them right now is priority number one, and it should be. And in fairness, if he has good people around him, they should want him to play in North America as well. That's it. Let's see. There's a whole bunch of comments, and I want to make sure that we keep moving on here. Andrew Fawcett says, in my opinion, there's no way that he's the backup to Peterson this year. The guy barely played an NHL or is barely an AHL goalie at this point. The problem is, like, Cal Peterson is still a pro, right? In theory, he's not a good goalie, but like he's a pro. He's getting paid. They're not going to like send him home. He's not being accused of conduct detrimental to the team. But I do agree. He should be there as a mentor, as an advisor of sorts, and Kolosov should be getting every game under his belt that he can at Lehigh Valley. Let's see. Landros 2 says, unless the kid is 100% committed, this won't end well. Kid needs to step up. Sean C. also notes, Dynamo Minsk doesn't seem like a team that would cross the IIHF. Their camp opens soon. I guess we'll see. I just don't see it. Again, like the IIHF is kind of a joke. If you remember when Fedotov signed a deal with a KHL team after he had already signed a deal with the Flyers, the IIHF said, well, then he can't play for the national team, and that the KHL should recognize that Fedotov has a legal binding contract with the NHL. It didn't happen. It didn't matter, all that. If the IIHF were to come out and say, like, Kolosov is under contract to the Flyers, they're probably not going to end up in a situation where, like, if Dynamo Minsk, for example, decides that they're going to sign him and the KHL gives it the okay, they aren't going to care that he's under contract to the Flyers. Flyers can, like, appeal it. They can complain. They can maybe try to get money out of it. But, like, ultimately, you could have a repeat of history. But, again, I just don't see Dynamo Minsk doing it. I could be wrong. All right, let's see. I think that's it for right now on the Flyers front. Let's get off the Flyers. Let's get finally to the Eagles. And then we have one last little note there about JD Vance and the Swiss cheese on the cheesesteak. We'll talk about that in a second. There was an interesting story that hit ESPN.com this morning. I am not necessarily one who loves going to ESPN Plus to have to read things behind the paywall. But I guess on a positive note, I have ESPN Plus, so I'm able to read the article. Now, I'm not going to read all of this out to everybody because it would make for a very long and boring and droning kind of content. But Bill Barnwell put out his list of predicting the 5 NFL teams most likely to decline in 2024. And the teams were as follows. He's got the Steelers, the Giants, the Ravens, the Eagles, and the Browns are his 5 teams that he thinks are most likely to regress. And he did note that with the Eagles selection, that this might have been the toughest decision. Like, this might have been the one that was the hardest. So we're gonna throw to this story a little bit, and we're gonna be careful here because it's behind a paywall. You gotta be careful how much of the story you show or whatever. But okay, so here we go. Here's Barnwell's take on the Eagles, at least as of right now. Let's see. Does that look prettier on the stream, guys? Let's see. That's better. All right. So he does note the fact that the Eagles had a sensational run and then things fell apart at the end of the season. I will tell you that the thing that he is the most worried about, I guess, if for the Eagles or for Eagles fans, is that last year's second half, when the wheels really fell off, might be indicative of things to come. This is the thing that I guess is an interesting note at the start. This is one that I went back to a couple of times. The Eagles outscored their opposition by 0.3 points per game. If we take 73 teams from 1989 to 2022 that outscored the teams they played by an average of 0 to 1 points per game and see how they performed, just 11 of those 73 teams produced double-digit win totals the following season. Unsurprisingly, they were 74-25 in one-score games that season. Also unsurprisingly, they were 40-43 in those same contests the following season. Now, one of the things that he notes within the story is the Eagles had a lot of luck. That the Eagles won 7-3 in one-score games last year, but like you have to go back and take a look at how they ended up in those games. So you have that week 1 game, Pats failed to score on their 2-point attempt. New England came up short because they needed a touchdown instead of a field goal. Week 4, Philly defense allows a touchdown with no time on the clock to tie it up. Ron Rivera goes for the extra point. Instead of, guys just showed up to mow the lawn. Just hit the window. That's not great. We'll get through this. But instead of attempting the 2-pointer to win the game, Eagles hit a field goal to win in overtime. That was a 1-score game. Week 9, Eagles stopped another 2-pointer that would have made it a 3-point game against the Cowboys. Dallas then drove to the Phillies 6-yard line with 27 seconds to go, only to fall apart with a false start, sack, and delay of game penalty. Week 11, the Chiefs trailed by 4 points with a minute 40 to go. Valdez-Scantling dropped a would-be touchdown pass that would have given Kansas City the lead. We remember that game. So late game heroics, Barnwell kind of points out, are not sustainable. That could be a problem. That is a problem potentially for the Eagles team. His real questions are about the defense, not as much the offense. Mentioning that when Vic Fangio got fired by the Dolphins, that his players in Miami seemed to rejoice and be glad that he was gone. Noting the fact that they brought back CJ GJ a year after deciding he wasn't worth a multi-year contract. They brought him back, but he didn't play a lot in Detroit because he was hurt. That James Bradberry is here specifically, if not exclusively, because he was owed a decent roster bonus. Noting the fact that the Eagles went out and used high draft picks on corners, but that it's really hard for corners to have an impact as rookies. So he's got a lot of questions, a lot of concerns around the defense. And like, I would say that for the most part, there's a lot of good insight here. Kind of. But like, there are questions about Jordan Davis, about Jalen Carter, about Nolan Smith, about all those guys. There are more. On the offensive side of the ball, his concern has to do with the idea of you're replacing Jason Kelce with Cam Jurgens, and you're in theory going to put Mekhi Becton in where Jurgens was at right guard. And the hope is that it's going to work, but you're trying to replace a Hall of Famer on a line that was just like almost historically good. That Eagles offensive line has been fantastic for years. So there's a little bit of concern there. His big concern, at least on the offensive side, is that they do not have any depth on the line. And that some of the guys that were either expected to compete or had been, competitive and useful in recent years, that those guys aren't here anymore. So those are concerns as well. But ultimately, and this is where I think that there's a little bit of misguidedness in his analysis, every team has problems. Every team has holes. Every team has moments where they look like they have no depth, and then the season starts and somebody does get hurt, and a guy that was expected to do absolutely nothing of value ends up becoming a starter caliber player. It happens every year. What the Eagles defense really needs to do is create havoc. I think that's ultimately going to be the thing that helps this team get back into their winning ways. You need to have a positive turnover differential. You have to make sure that you don't fall apart late in games. You can't have the defensive coverages, blown assignments, and everything that happened late in games that were happening down the stretch last year. I'd also point out that like the Eagles last year, I think had the 11th strongest schedule, like 11th strongest opposition strength schedule. They have the 8th easiest schedule this year, at least entering the season. That has to account for something. It has to mean something. So I get it. And like, I would encourage you, if you have ESPN Plus, if you can go read the whole story, there's some good insight. But like, ultimately, this comes down to whether or not Jalen Hurts and this star-studded offense are able to go out and just outscore teams. And like, yeah, in theory, it'd be great for the defense to be better than it was a year ago. And they're going to need to be if you're going to try to compete for a Super Bowl. But like, in theory, this offense should be able to go out and outscore just about any team you're going to play against. They should be able to. I'm going to go out to the comments. Let's see. Where are we at? Chris Freed says, best quarterback in the league is out there in the preseason throwing passes behind his back while the Eagles starters don't even sniff the field in the preseason. Difference between a Super Bowl champion and a wannabe. I think that's actually a fair critique and a fair criticism. This is the thing, like when we kind of did the live stream on this show, right? Remember we were going to try to watch it with the starters. And I was like, oh, why are we not like, why aren't we seeing any starters for even like one series. There are people like, Russ, you're a jackass. Like, why would you expect that in the first preseason game against the Ravens? And I was like, well, because I do think that live reps matter. I do think that like live reps, even if they're in preseason, are still more impactful than what you get in practice. Patrick Mahomes has won multiple titles. Andy Reid has won multiple titles. Mahomes is out there. Is he taking it as seriously as he normally would, like with a regular season game? Absolutely not. Is it still setting the right tone and the expectation that like we are locked in, we're going to try to go out and win another Super Bowl and have those guys out in the preseason? Yes. I think it's disappointing to not have seen Jalen Hurts. I think it's a problem. Landros says, I like the disrespect. These guys read this shit. # motivation. I think it's hard to see the Eagles regressing from where they were a year ago. I think you can maybe make the case that like, I mean, in theory, just because of where their record landed, yeah, they could regress. They could be like a close to 500 team, right? They could be like a game over 500. I'm still pretty convinced that they're going to have a very successful year. We'll do a season preview before the first regular season game. I think the Eagles are going to be a much better team than Bill Barnwell thinks they're going to be. Let's see this. HC may be arguing the opposite side about the preseason. How many times did Wentz get hurt in preseason? Too many. Andrew Fawcett says, Eagles collapse was epic, though. It could say more about the team construction than we think. Joe Papel, not a big Vic Fangio believer, noting that his defense got destroyed by Baltimore, Buffalo, and Kansas City. What do those teams have in common, though, in fairness? Like, let's be fair, Joe. Lamar Jackson, multi-time MVP. Josh Allen, one of the top 4 quarterbacks in the NFL. Kansas City, multi-time Super Bowl winner. Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback in the league. I don't know if that's necessarily fair to point. Like, I get the idea of pointing it out. Those are 3 teams with incredible quarterbacks and also different kinds of quarterbacks, in fairness. Andrew says the only coach I have faith in is Stoutland. Let's see. Andrew notes that Kelsey seems to be around a lot to mentor Juergens. Well, remember, he kind of helped pick his successor. So you would think that it does matter to him to see Cam Juergens have success at the NFL level, to have success taking over as the center of the team. Here's the thing about Kelsey, right? He ultimately chose to walk away from the game. He chose his health. He chose his family. He thought that it was the right time. He still has to have some kind of vested interest in the Eagles being successful, right? Like, he'll be a Hall of Famer. He'll go in as an Eagle. We all know this. He still lives in the area. Presumably, he's going to serve as an Eagles ambassador from now until the time, that he's ready to depart this earth, right? So he's going to want to see the team do well. He put his neck out there to some extent, big meaty neck. He put that neck out there for Cam Juergens. He wants to see the guy succeed. And if he does, by the way, that proves that he's done a good job of at least scouting the center position. Perhaps that's a way for him to remain in the organization and around the team. Could we see a scenario where Jason Kelsey maybe doesn't serve as an offensive line coach, but maybe is serving as some form of a scout? It's entirely possible. JToxic49, countering the Wentz argument. Never understood why it matters if a guy gets hurt in the preseason. Aaron Rodgers not lasting 1 series in game 1. I guess that's fair to some extent. Like, you can have the conversation about, like, does it matter where or when the guy gets hurt? Like, an injury is going to happen no matter what. I think that the people who are overly conservative when it comes to the preseason are like, you would rather your guy gets hurt in a regular season game going out and like busting his ass on a play that actually matters in a game that matters. Whereas if you have a guy gets hurt in preseason and ends up missing 10 weeks or ends up missing the entire season, you're like, wow, we played him in a game that meant nothing. He got hurt, and had he not played in that game, maybe he doesn't get hurt. It's a whole lot of whataboutisms, right? Sean C. says, if Hurts and company don't play a series or quarter on Saturday, it's a joke. The bait and switch in Baltimore seemed like a blatant dig. It was pathetic. Again, this is where like McClain, John Clark, put out that Sirianni said he wanted to get his starters in for at least a series. It didn't happen. I agree. You have to see these guys. It's not like we don't know what Jalen Hurts is. It isn't like we don't know what Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are. But like there are concerns and there are questions about the defense. And like as an Eagles fan, you should hope to get to at least see some sample. You should at least be able to expect to see a little bit of what this team is going to look like ahead of time. Kind of whet your whistle a little bit. Let's see. Andrew says, Sirianni's "I'm smarter than everyone" attitude is bordering on Chip Kelly territory. I don't know if that's fair. I don't know how much it's I'm smarter than everyone. Maybe it's that. I just think that Sirianni's in this like really weird position where everybody seems to think that he's just a glorified cheerleader and that he has a lot to prove this season. He better execute. This team, listen, we said this on the show a few weeks ago. Bill Belichick is reportedly monitoring the Eagles and the Cowboys situation. The Eagles fired a defensive coordinator before the end of the regular season last year. If this Eagles team starts out 0-2, 0-3, and Bill Belichick is realistically like in play, those rumors are going to get very, very loud. And all of that conjecture that was kind of being thrown out there in like the Boston area and like maybe, on a secondary, tertiary podcast by an ESPN reporter, that all probably starts to become a much bigger question. Who's going to replace Nick Sirianni? So it's imperative for Sirianni that the Eagles season starts out strong, or he will end up being on the hottest seat in all of the NFL. Now, last thing for today. We are not getting political on the show today. I will point out that it was going around Twitter yesterday, and there was a video that also circulated of JD Vance going to get a cheesesteak at Pat's. And there was a legitimate concern that was expressed because allegedly, we're going to throw over to this really quick. This was done over at the Philadelphia Inquirer. I did not read this story, so I will give you that little bit of a caveat here. Over at the Inquirer, JD Vance gets a cheesesteak at Pat's. He asked about why we don't have Swiss cheese. This apparently upset a lot of people. It upset a lot of Philadelphians. I need to know, does this change anything for you? Like, really, truly, does it change anything? Now, do I think that it's a great look that you go to Philly and you don't know how to order? Maybe. Now, there is a video going around, so we're gonna go over to the video quickly as well, because maybe he did ask prior to the cheesesteak. Maybe he asked post ordering the cheesesteak what to get. But it does sound like he did order correctly. So we're going to throw that because we are fair and balanced here at the Russ Joy Show. We show you what the Inky wrote, but I'm going to show you the video of him ordering the cheesesteak because it's important. This is going around over on twitter.com. Here we go.
I don't like Swiss cheese either, but everybody says it's insulting. Why do you guys hate Swiss cheese so much? What's the story?
We hate it. We just don't do it. We just use cheese whiz. That's what I'm not.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, that's what I want. I want a cheesesteak with whiz and onions. What do you want? Cheese whiz? I'm gonna do these.
Let's go back to the start of this again.
I don't like Swiss cheese either, but everybody says.
All right. So he says, I don't like Swiss cheese either, but I want to know why you guys don't offer Swiss cheese. And then the guy at the Pat's counter says, because we do whiz. Whiz is what you do. And they said, I want whiz and I want onions. Now, should somebody have said early to him, just go up to the counter, say whiz wit, and walk away, get your cheesesteak, be happy? Maybe. Did we have lying, deceitful media? So Philadelphia Inquirer lying again. I don't know. Maybe. He did. I mean, we saw the video. He asked why they don't have Swiss cheese. He says in the video, I don't like Swiss cheese. So I don't know. If I read that Inky headline, I'd be like, wow.
You're telling me, hold on a second. You're telling me this motherfucker came to the Pats? He came to Pats and he asked for Swiss cheese? Is that what you're telling me, Russ? You're telling me that this guy, he didn't even do a little bit of research? He tried to order a cheesesteak with Swiss? What kind of domestic terrorist is this? The video just said he doesn't like Swiss cheese. How do I feel about JD Vance? Doesn't matter right now. All I'm saying is, when I saw the Inky headline, I'm like, wow, this guy, he showed up to this city
and he asked for Swiss cheese. Aren't you out of your mind? Does nobody prepare these people when they go? What? He said he didn't like Swiss cheese. I don't know. I would say that inky headline, while accurate, because he did ask about the Swiss cheese, may have been a little bit misleading. Now, some of you are going to be like, Russ, thank you so much. Thank you so much for setting that record straight. I want to thank you for defending the honor of JD Vance. And some of you other people are going to be like, do you like the couches too? Everybody chill out. I do actually have this question, though, because this obviously doesn't change anything. There's no rational, sane human being who should be allowed to vote who would see that headline or see that clip and say, that's going to change my vote for president of the United States. That won't have any impact. But I do wonder, and let me know in the comments, because I'd like to get to a couple of these really quick, because there are comments over now. How important do you think it is for a politician who's running, like, let's say at a national level, to know how to order whatever the local delicacy is, right? Or, by the way, we're not saying like Pat's is, I don't want to get into like, is Pat's a good cheesesteak? Do people hate Pat's because it's touristy? Is it actually a bad cheesesteak? Is it actually a good cheese? Like, is it important to know how to order? That's my question. Let me know in the comments, because I'm actually intrigued. I think it is. I do think it matters. I think that, like, if you are running a national campaign, your people should either know or they should talk to people at the local level to be like, we're doing this PR thing. How does my candidate order so that they don't sound like a jackass? And how do they order so that they sound like a normal person? Okay, let's go to the comments. Because I see some people popping up. J Toxic said fake news about the inky headline. J Toxic also says Swiss cheese is the commie cheese. What's this? 2 of 2. What's 2 of 2? At the cheesesteak shop at 9th Street and Passyunk Avenue. But everyone says it's insulting. Why do you guys hate it so much? What's the story? Is that what was that another thing that he said? I guess, maybe. I don't know. HC. Oh, this is good historical knowledge. John Kerry ordered a cheesesteak with Swiss during his campaign. Are these kinds of things really how people decide if the candidate they vote for? HC, I don't know if you've noticed or not. There are a lot of stupid people in this world. There are a lot of genuinely stupid people in the world. They don't watch or listen to the Russ Joy Show because I only have the best and brightest. But yes, there are very stupid people out there. This actually might have affected somebody. There is a human being who has the same right to vote that you and I do, who might actually see that and say, that's enough to swing my vote. If you don't know how to order like a true Philadelphian, you don't get my vote. Okay. Let's see. Andrew Fawcett says he doesn't care about politics at all. We're living in the Matrix. Joe Papel says nobody cares how the cheesesteak goes. Andrew asks, why does your voice for JD Vance supporter sound like a redneck? He wrote Redneck Elegy or Hillbilly Elegy. We got to play it at least a little bit here, Andrew. You got to play the hits a little bit. Next will be an argument about why he didn't go to Geno's. So, I don't know. That actually would have been funny. What if we could have had the Republicans on one and the Democrats on another? And when they could have had like the Sharks and the Jets, we could have had like a little West Side Story going head to head for the cheesesteaks? No? Okay. It doesn't seem like anybody in the comments, by the way, is very triggered about the idea of asking about Swiss. I certainly, from my vantage point, I feel better that this guy didn't go and try to order Swiss. He just asked why they didn't have it. Does that make me feel a little bit better about just political campaigns in general, that apparently somebody must have told him, hey, this is how you order. This is what makes me feel a little bit better. It does. Not because I care about him particularly, just in general. I just like to know that we at least have an understanding. You can't have somebody who comes in. Like if he had gone and said, like, why don't you guys have pepper jack? I don't even know. Pat's probably doesn't have pepper jack. Like somebody come in, can you put some pepper jack? Or like, here, I brought my own vegan almond cheese. Can you put this on? Like, I'd be offended. That actually would upset me. That might have me consider my vote for whichever party. If somebody like showed up and said, here's my almond-based cheese, can you melt this on there for me? That would actually be a violation. I think that's the place to end. When you start getting to plant-based cheeses, they're not cheeses anymore. They're not cheese. I don't know what they are. They're not cheese. Almonds are not cheese. Cashews are not cheese. If it's cheese, it has to come from the cow. There has to be some kind of moo juice in it. You can't make cheese from a nut. That's not how this works. The end. Okay. Let's see. Last thing. Landra says, I've been taught that it's supposed to be whiz. Have I been led astray? Ooh. Do I do the unpopular take here? I think whiz is good. I prefer, if a place has Cooper Sharp, I like Cooper Sharp in my cheesesteaks. If places have American, I typically like to have American. The one place that I violate this rule for, though, is Tony Luke's. I think Tony Luke's whiz has like a buttery kind of, there's like a little unctuousness, some butteriness to their whiz, and that is truly enjoyable. I don't like some of the whiz at some of the cheesesteak places, which is why I like to go American. Go Cooper Sharp. In fairness, I could just go to Gazzo's right down the road, though, and they've got the best one. They've got the smoked aged Cooper Sharp. Sensational. Next level stuff. Should do something with them at some point. Anyway, I think that's it for today. Let's see if there's anything else that came in at the end. HC says, can I have a side order of avocado toast and pumpkin spice half-calf soy latte, please? I will say, this is going to be my controversial take when I'm leaving. All right. Ooh. Andrew says provolone or go home. Landros comes in as a visitor in Philly. Landros, get American. If there's Cooper Sharp American, you go that way. Depending on the place, cheese whiz. You send me a DM when you're in town, and I'll let you know. I'll give you the guidance. Okay. Always. This thing about the pumpkin spice, I will say, right as I'm pulling it up, Andrew Fawcett says pumpkin spice sucks. This is controversial to add. It's only going to be in the low 70s today. We opened the windows in our house. Looked at my wife this morning. You know what we said to each other? Pumpkin spice season, baby. Woo! Get the pumpkin spice. Get the oat milk. Get it all ready. It's time. It's going to be back in the mid to high 80s next week, so that's probably going to change. But for right now, boy, do I feel good. Pumpkin spice weather. Okay, that's it. Thanks for tuning into the Russ Joy Show. I appreciate everybody who joined me live on the Russ Joy Show YouTube channel and the people who joined over on the Joy Media LLC YouTube channel as well. Do me a favor if you haven't done so already. Like the video. That's massive. Like the video. Share the video to some people in your life who enjoy Philly sports, who enjoy some of these weird little chats that we have at the end about political candidates asking about Swiss. Share it to everyone that you know. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're over there and you can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, it'd be great. 5-star review, you type out the thing, and then I read it on the show. You can say nice things. You can say mean things. If it's 5 stars, I will read it on the show. If you're on Spotify, leave a 5-star rating. You can't leave reviews, but you can go to the show page and leave a 5-star review or a 5-star rating. We are going to have more stuff. There's going to be more stuff going up on this channel. As some of you have noticed and seen and all that, I have clips that I put out from some of these longer episodes that go into their own little playlist on the YouTube channel. I'm going to keep going with that. Some of you see it and you start going, you go, wait a second, I think I heard this already, because you're people who already watch and listen to the show. But it helps. It helps to attract and to bring in more people to find this show and to subscribe, and it works. So I'm going to keep doing the clips and everything. So anyway, everybody have a great day. Later in the week, we might get into a big national story. It's something that I wanted to talk about when I was in New York, and it was mostly rumors, and it looks like it might go through today, and it is a soccer-y thing, but Mauricio Pochettino might get formally announced between now and Friday's show as U.S. men's national team coach. I would like to get into that along with all the other Philly sports stuff. We'll see how this Phillies-Braves series goes. By the time we get back together, the Phillies-Braves series will be over, and the Phillies will be about to take on the Royals. Things can change, and virtually every time I've done this show, one episode has been everything's great and hunky-dory, and the next is the world is burning, I hate baseball. I don't know where I feel right now, but I'll be back on Friday, and we will break all of it down. Phillies, Eagles, maybe the U.S. men's national team. We might talk about the union. Who knows? You come, you have fun. We talk, we do the whole thing. We're going to have a lot of fun on Friday's show. Everybody get excited. I will talk to all of you very soon. Thank you again for checking out the Russ Joy Show, and I will talk to all of you Friday morning. Bye-bye.